Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great that you're here. There's some more people just joining in the meeting, so we'll just let them in. I think joining me also is our assistant head, Mr. Norris, Mr. Michael Norris. If you want to test your sound there, Mike.
Right, good morning all. Pete, can you hear me?
Yeah, no problem at all. And we've just got a few more people joining the workshop this morning. A truly international workshop, probably appropriate for EAL, as our students are probably from more places than everybody else. So I'm in the UK at the moment. I shall be traveling to Taiwan later this week, finally. Mike's there in the head office in the school. And we just have a few more people coming into the meeting, and then we'll get started on that one.
So while we're waiting for those people, I'd like to formally introduce you to Peter Collier. He's our new head of EAL for our British primary section. And as he has just mentioned to you, due to COVID complications where he came from, not that he had COVID, but in terms of the context, he had to return to the UK to organize his visa to come to Taiwan, and that is well underway, and he'll be traveling, I believe, this week, and will be arriving in Taiwan next week, where he undergoes his mandatory 2-week quarantine. But I would like to formally welcome Peter Collier. He comes to us with a wealth of experience in the field of EAL in international schools, and I'm sure that his workshop this morning is going to enlighten you as to how we support EAL children in our British primary section. So welcome to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who's come online this morning as well. So we'll just move. I hope everybody can see the slides okay, and the screen share is working. Just let these people in. So here we go. Let's have a quick look to start off after our welcomes, the structure of the department this year. So as you say, I'm joining as head of EAL. It's a new position at the school, and that's to try and coordinate. And Mike's such a busy person with all of his responsibilities as assistant head that it moves over to me a little bit more to try and coordinate the EAL program, which I know everybody's so enthusiastic about. So I'm sure you're aware already, in year 1, we have Gareth and Vanessa. And then in year 2, Julia and Sebastian. They do fantastic work, really, really important work in Key Stage 1 for years 1 and 2. It's where you can make so much impact in such a short time with the younger students. So it's really good that we're able to put four full-time members of staff down there in Key Stage 1. And then meanwhile in Key Stage 2, Julia, Corney, Joanna, and B. So again, 1 person per year group there, offering really a huge amount of support across Key Stage 2. And I've not known a school before internationally where there have been so many members of staff in an EAL department just in the primary section. Normally for a school of 1,500 people or more, you might have 4 or 5 people for the whole school. So to have such a well-staffed department puts us in an excellent position going forward. And then in addition to that, part of our super intensive program is Anne, and I'll talk more about the super intensive program in a little while. Just a bit of background about me as well. I started teaching in the UK 18 years ago, and then I moved to the Middle East, and then became an EAL teacher while I was there. I made a transition across, complete some extra qualifications, and then moved to Suzhou for Dulwich College, where I was head of EAL in junior school. And then in the last 3 years, I've been with Dulwich College in Yangon in Myanmar, where I set up the EAL department in a newly opened school from the ground up on day 1. So I'm really excited to be coming to a well-established school now, where with such a great team of people and some fantastic students I'm looking forward to meeting, where we're going to really move things forward on into the next few years as well. So that's the team. these are the people to go to in the first instance. If you have any queries or questions, then please reach out to the EAL team, or indeed reach out to me, and we can talk a little bit more about communication and how we can really move forward with that as well over the rest of the year. Mike, do you want to add anything in there?
No, just to say that this presentation by Peter this morning is being recorded, and we will place this recording on our newsletter for you, so you can sit back and enjoy it without necessarily taking down any notes. We will provide you with a link to this recording on the newsletter this week.
And just to add, Mike, we have got some time, a little bit of time at the end for some questions or queries if people have anything. All I'd say is, if you do have any questions that come up, just make a note of it, and then we will answer it at the end there. But I think for anything that's student specific, so if it's about your child, then maybe it's best to reach out to your EAL teacher first, rather than in this public forum on Zoom. I'd just like to say that. So let's move on here, and we'll think about what is EAL and what does it mean? So NALDIC, who are an organization who are very prominent in the field of EAL teaching and EAL learning, say that EAL is the learning of English in addition to the learner's first language. That's a change they've made fairly recently. They've started to take account that learners might have two, three, or four languages that they're having to operate in. So for us now, EAL is in addition to the learner's first language, but that might be part of another language as well. I mean, if you imagine you're from Belgium, you might have Flemish and French, and you're learning English as well. So that would be EAL. Other terms you might have seen, ESL, English as a second language, that's pretty much interchangeable with EAL these days, as far as NALDIC are concerned. And ELL, English language learner, and that's a US term. So if you've had any schooling in the US or an American system school, or maybe you've seen that in a language school for children, then they might have used the term ELL as well. So we also have our SIEAL SEAL program, and that's for new learners of English. So we're calling that super intensive EAL. For me, I would say EAL for us is to allow students to independently access the mainstream curriculum, and that's our end goal. So if you do have a child or children on the program, it's really important that they are on the program, because it's going to allow them, after a little bit of time, to be able to access all the things they need to become independent learners moving forward. So that's really the reason for the department, and the reason that we're all here is so that your children can quickly be able to access the mainstream curriculum, and that will grow, and we'll talk about how that can grow throughout these slides coming up. Okay, so I think it's important now, really, that we think about how students or your children are going to learn a language. A little bit of theory for you. This is an important person for EAL teachers. He's probably right up there for the last 40 years in terms of the research that he does and his ideas. And he says that Krashen says that students acquire or get their language informally in language-rich classrooms through risk-free, meaningful interactions with peers and teachers and parents. So what he's saying there is that it's really important that the classroom environment at TES that your children enjoy, in that time, they're exposed to lots of language, and they're able to just soak it up like a sponge. It's like children are like an open box, and the language is able to go in. And the younger they are, the lid of that box is further and further open. And that's why as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to learn a language, but not impossible. But the second thing he says is that formally learning how language works, the mechanics of the language, the grammar and genres. I mean, it's really important that that is taught as well. So at TES, there's the huge amount of in-class support that we offer, but also there's the opportunity for the pull-out sessions where we're able to work a lot more on the mechanics of the language with students who are learning English, so that they're able to make links from their own knowledge, but also to have extra instruction on those things which they find difficult. And here we go. I've done a little diagram here about a language learning journey. So as students join the school, they had an entry assessment, and the results of those assessments and the teacher assessments that the EAL team have been doing over the last couple of weeks have allowed them to develop resources and think about the sort of resources they need working with the class teachers that are going to suit the needs of your children. So through the integrated curriculum, which is all of the other subjects, the teachers are always looking for opportunities where they can develop those language skills. They're looking to increase how consistently and accurately that students use the language, and they're also trying to promote students to have a deeper understanding. So through their written work or speaking and listening activities and opportunities to speak, they're looking to try and develop that as well. And the whole time they're evaluating, assessing how this is, and that's going to feed forwards. If I can just click here, it's going to feed forwards into something you might have heard of called the EAL. Something I'm going to be looking at as well here is this last one, a curriculum-wide approach. I think there's a lot of opportunities where we can look at other subjects where there's a huge amount of language and communication. For instance, if you think about PE, the need for communication in sport is absolutely huge in a non-threatening environment. So I think that that's something that we're going to look at promoting even more across the coming year, and working with the staff, bringing everybody together for that real curriculum-wide approach. That's the non-threatening way that these children can acquire their language. Mike, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. We're not only looking at language when it comes to traditional English classes. Language that cuts across our curriculum and is used in many learning areas, and at times that has to be taught explicitly in those learning areas as well. So we say that every teacher in our school is a language teacher, not only the classroom teachers. So that's an important consideration.
Okay, I did just a little bit more theory for you, but I think it's important for us to start to have a little bit of an understanding about why our children are on the EAL program and about the language learning. I'd like to just show you this picture here. It's quite a famous picture of some icebergs. And if we have a look here, I'm going to say that it's about making links. Okay, so between your first language, the one maybe that you speak at home, and English. So I'd like to look at the bottom part here at first, this submerged part of the iceberg under the water. This is called, for us, a common underlying proficiency. And what that means is that's all of your knowledge. That's the things that children or that all of us understand. So a little bit like on your computer, your Google Drive or your hard drive on your computer, this is all of the files of things that you know. That means that you understand this thing here is a glass of water. Not the words for it, but you understand what it is. It's an understanding of the world around you and those things. And it's a huge amount of knowledge that's in your brain and in children's brains, and it's just sitting there. This surface features of L1 Well, if you speak French at home, then that's your French language there. And it's only this small part here. And the surface features of L2, we're going to call that learning English. And that's these bits here, the surface features. Now, what this common underlying proficiency does is it allows you to make links of these words, this language of L1. If you have a good common underlying proficiency, you can just link across, you can learn the words and the language for L2 quite easily. Okay, if this is small, this common underlying proficiency, and you don't have a lot of first language, then it's going to be really hard to have a large iceberg for the English for the L2 part. So with the integrated curriculum at TES, that we're always thinking about knowledge and skills and developing the whole child. We spoke about things like sport and music and all of these things. It helps to increase our common underlying proficiency. Now, at home, I'll just come back to that in a moment, but I just wanted to show that. But what this does, this common underlying proficiency, it allows us to move up this pyramid towards our higher level thinking skills. So remembering would just be remembering words or remembering things, and then understanding and applying. We want to move our students up here to start analyzing and creating and using their language for that. So I'm sure you're aware that our higher level thinking takes place in our dominant language or our mother tongue. Now, I spoke to my wife, who speaks about 5 languages. English would probably be her second language sometimes, but I said, how do you think? And she said, well, it depends where I am. She said, if I'm in England, I'm speaking English a lot, then I might be thinking in English. But if I go home, then I might be thinking in the language I'm using there. But predominantly for children, they'll be doing the hard thinking in their mother tongue. So if you speak Mandarin as your first language, you're probably going to think in Mandarin for really hard stuff. You're not going to be thinking very much in English. And we have to take account of that. So it's really important that at home, going back to the icebergs we just looked at, that you continue to develop your first language thinking skills, so you can transfer those to English or another language if you're going to learn another second language or a third language. Is it really good to have that knowledge and understanding in your strongest language, because it makes it a lot easier for that L2 iceberg to become much, much bigger. If you just think of what we're asking our children to do, when we're asking them to do this hard thinking and analyzing and making evaluations and things, is they're probably going to have to read the question in English and then translate that in their head and then figure out what it means after they've translated it, and then think about what they need to say in their first language because they're thinking in their mother tongue. And then they've got to figure out, once they've done the hard thinking, they've got to make an answer from it, and then translate it back into the second language, and then try and verbalize that at school in their classroom. And that's going to take a bit of time for them to do. So it's really important that we're mindful if we're asking, when our students are doing work or things like that, to have them answer in both languages, have them translate it to you at home. And if you're trying to help with some really hard homework, then do it in your first language and then figure it out in the English as well. It's really, really challenging, and it certainly requires some thinking time for the students.
Just on that, Peter, if I could come in there, very often we get asked the question by parents, should I be speaking to my child in English at home to develop their English at home? And the answer to that, I think, is what Peter is trying to put across here. No, we're wanting the home language to remain strong so that the child can tap into their prior knowledge that has come from their first language, and use that to make links into English. So it's very important, not only from a language perspective, but also from a cultural perspective. The children identify with their culture through language as well, and we don't want to take that away. That is an important part of the child's education as well.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I'd like to follow on from that, especially when I was in the Middle East. We worked in a big school, and a lot of parents would ensure that English was spoken all the time at home as well, even though for some of those families it might have been a third or a fourth language even. So everything was happening in English with people who weren't necessarily using English as their first language, and it made making progress quite a bit more challenging for some students, for some children, because the grammar and some of the mechanics that we like to teach weren't being reinforced at home. It'd been much better sometimes if they'd be working in their first language in terms of how the progress that the students were able to make. So please don't feel threatened about using first language at home. I'd really like to actively promote that. So I've just got a few extra thoughts here to encourage you to have a really rich and diverse first language at home to support the learning of English. In international schools, it's likely that you're probably not if you've come from another country, you're probably not going to stay there forever, and you may move somewhere else, or most people eventually will move home, or quite often students will want to go back to their home country for cultural and family reasons to go and study when they're much, much older. What we find is that while students who aren't having a rich first language can have good oral spoken skills in their home language, their writing and their grammar can also decline. And sometimes there have been cases internationally where students haven't been able to get into their home universities because their first language hasn't been strong enough. I've seen that quite a lot. And comments just coming through. I've seen that quite a lot where we've ended up with people with sort of 2 or 3 second languages. And that was something I used to come across quite a lot. And it's really important to really maintain that first language as well for the future. So here's some very quick ideas for things that I'm sure people like to do anyway. Don't feel afraid to speak your language. It's really important that you do that. Going back to what Mike said as well about cultural reasons and identifying with your culture. Write and play, discuss and question. There's nothing wrong with talking about schoolwork and things in your first language, even if the learning is in English. I'd encourage if your children are bringing home a reading book, have them tell you about what's happening in the reading book in your first language. That allows them to access those higher level thinking skills more easily because they're not having to keep translating. So just because the book is in English, there's nothing wrong with talking about it in your first language. I'd actually encourage that, especially with younger students. It's going to make it much more easy for them to tell you what's happening in a book. Much easier than it used to be with the internet and things like that. It's much easier to find materials to watch and sing and listen. When I was learning French, right back at school and doing A-levels in French, it was really hard to get reading material. Apart from the couple of radio stations, it was hard to watch things. It's much easier now to have access to cultural material online and do those sorts of things. But also, one of the important things we like to do at TES is what we call front loading of language. That's where children will bring home vocabulary, words, phrases that are linked to their learning at school, where they're able to practice that vocabulary before they have exposure to it in the classroom. And this allows them to feel that part of that, creating that less threatening environment in the classroom that we spoke about earlier with Krashen, about being able to acquire language informally in a language-rich classroom, is this front-loading approach. So by all means, practice those words in English and look up the definitions, but also talk about them in your home language and build up that common underlying proficiency, that underneath the iceberg part, students are going to be able to have a much better understanding, especially if they've just started to learn English, about that. And in a lot of subjects, things like science, scientific vocabulary is often the same across many, many languages. So it's really easy for them to make those links. If they understand what the thing is that they're learning about, then it's very easy for them to make the link from the word in the first language to the second language. So I'd really encourage that front loading, have discussion about it in your first language and your second language, or English as well, if you can. Mike, I know front loading is really important. I don't know if you wish to add anything on that one.
I think you've covered that. It just shows the importance of the EAL. The teacher is very much involved in the planning of lessons that are coming up in the following week. So the EAL teacher attends all planning lessons with the classroom teacher, and therefore has a direct connection with what important vocabulary and language structures are coming up the following week. So that's when the EAL teacher can pre-teach that, so that when the child is then exposed to that language and vocabulary in the classroom the following week, they feel a lot more confident in being able to access the discussion.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. It's really important. So thinking now more about some of the questions that parents like to ask us about, how do you track learning? How do you know where my child is, and when might they exit the EAL program? It's probably the most common question I've been asked over the last 10 years. So at the moment, we base our assessment on a document from England called NASI, and that's an assessment framework. It works quite nicely across Key Stage 1 and 2. So here's just a little overview. If I just move that window down there. Our EAL billing cycle is twice a year. We have 2 semesters on that one. So for this year, students can only exit at the end of these semesters, and that's to make the billing cycle work in line with the requirements of finance and the financial year. However, we have termly EAL assessments as well. So the EAL teacher will be collecting data throughout the term and then building up a picture of the progress and areas for development across the term, and things that they need to do. And this feeds into a document which we'll have a look at in a minute, called the ELIP, and that's the EAL program, and I'm going to come back to that. So broadly speaking, we assess these 4 areas to build up a picture of language learned and language to be learned: listening and understanding, speaking, reading, and writing. Now, it becomes a little bit more complicated if I just move forward. In addition to the continual in-class assessment, I need to show you what this looks like a little bit. I'm going to go, hang on a second here. I need to go, just move that one. I'll come back to that slide in a minute, I think, if I can. Let me go back one. Okay, thank you. Sorry, it just froze up for a minute. We're back. It's moving again. Right, so here's the ELIP. It's the EAL Individual Pupil Support Plan. So EAL teachers are going to look at progress, their ongoing assessments, which they're doing all the time in class, the NASI steps, and the curriculum links. and they're going to put they're going to make targets for the children to focus on to move their learning forward some more. Okay, after they've set their targets onto this document, they're going to make notes of an outcome, if it's been achieved, if students have done really well and done things in addition, which we hope to see. And then they'll think about reviewing this and then creating some next steps to feed forward into the next ELIP for the next term. Is that right so far, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. And that's a document that's shared as well. So
we have an online parent-teacher conference this Wednesday. You should have received an EAL Zoom invite from your respective EAL teacher, and if you haven't, you would have received it by Wednesday. And during that discussion with your EAL teacher, they will take you through the ELIPs that they have drawn up for your child.
Thanks for that. Sorry, it just went there. I hope you should be back with the ELIP page now. Excellent. So going back to the NASI steps just for a minute, there are 6 steps in year 1 and 2 in Key Stage 1, and that's from beginner through to an age-appropriate level or place where we'd be looking for students to exit the program. In Key Stage 2, there's 7 steps to be achieved, again, from beginner through to age-appropriate level of exit. And you can see here I've annotated with these letters BICS, which we call BICS, and CALP, which we call CALP, and that's basic interpersonal communication skills. So that's when you start to learn language. It's the playground language, things that children say when they are being social, in the lunch hall, playing with friends, all of those basic things. At the lowest level, can I use the bathroom, please? And then the CALP is the academic language proficiency. So that's at the top of the pyramid we looked at. This is the academic language, the harder language, technical vocabulary. And along this journey here, from step 1 to 6, you find that the BICS moves away and the CALP becomes stronger and stronger. Now, it's generally recognized that it can take up to 2 years to fully achieve BICS. Built into that could be a silent period for absolutely new learners of language for a few weeks up to a few months, and 5 to 7 years to fully achieve academic language proficiency. So if you started learning English at age 6, you could be 11 or 12 years old before you're fully academically proficient in that language. So although students might exit the EAL program after 18 months or 2 years or a year, we need to recognize that the journey of learning is continuing, and that feeds back to our point that all students are learning language and all of our teachers are teachers of language as well. So it takes a long time to reach the age appropriate level, and I'd like to show you this now here. So when we think about exiting, I've just made up this little rubric to show the steps. But generally speaking, listening and understanding is easier to achieve. So you can become age appropriate in listening and understanding and speaking much more quickly than you can in reading, and writing is the hardest to achieve. So I know parents often say, when's my child going to exit the program? They understand what's happening in the classroom, and they're able to speak about their learning and everything. That's the key thing that the EAL teacher then will be doing, is working on this reading and comprehension, deeper reading for deeper meaning, which is a really hard skill, and working on their writing as well. Because whilst we definitely don't want to keep students in the program longer than we have to, we also don't want to push them out into a mainstream curriculum too early, because although these skills, the listening and understanding, might be step 6 and 7, there could be some work to be done on the reading and writing areas that might not become so evident. So that's why it's really important to look at the ELIP and to look at the steps as well. Okay. So whole school approach we've spoken about pretty much, thinking of language and how we use our language in the curriculum, and the assessment, and how we support both at home and in school. So I'll move on with this one. And I'd just like to speak a little bit about communication here as we move towards the end. Is the most important thing that we can do together is make sure that we continue to have a supportive dialogue from us to you at home and school, and to the students as well, and from parents to students about learning language. It's really, really difficult to learn language, and it's really, really difficult to learn English as well. It's a language that's come from so many other places, and there are so many words. It's constantly changing, and being supportive in that journey will help the students. So please get in touch, reach out to your child's EAL teacher, talk to me. We have lots of ways you can get in touch now, email. There's going to be check-ins, as I say, in the parent consultations coming up this week. So we want this to be a two-way process as well, where we're keeping in touch for you. But please, if you have any concerns or worries, or some success stories that you want to share where things have gone really well that you weren't expecting, we love to hear that as well. It really gives the team a fantastic boost, and we are able to pass that on to the children as well, of some great things that have happened at home. And it helps the children to understand that what they're doing at school is supported at home, and the learning and all the work that you're doing at home to support their learning is also being celebrated at school. So, but also, if anything you're worried about, you're not sure about, we're here to help, and we're here to answer questions, and we've got time for you to do that. So the EAL handbook is coming forward. This should answer a lot of questions that you've got about EAL provision at TES. It's on its final update at the moment. We've just been reviewing that to make sure everything's up to date in there, and you're going to be getting to view this one soon. Mike?
Yep, that's great. So that's got all the information in one place that you, as a parent of an EAL child, will need. So that's great.
Okay, and I'll just have, and I think we're just towards the end now. So we've got a few minutes here for some questions and answers. If people would like to share, I'm just going to have a look in the chat. I can see there's a couple of questions. I hope people don't mind me sharing comments. Like someone says, it's difficult for their children to explain their homework and prefer in their first language and prefer it in English. Should we speak English or our first language? Well, I hope we've covered that one, but I would say it's really important to develop your first language, and we're also looking to develop the English. So do it in both if they're feeling confident with both, and that's sort of the ideal situation, really, if they to be a sort of, as an adult, bilingual, in terms of the general term of that, then I think you should challenge them to speak it in your first language for sure, because you don't want to fall into that situation later where their spoken first language is good, but their academic first language isn't. So I'd be challenging to do that in both. A question about handwriting. Children are requested to write in cursive. What about EL children didn't learn cursive writing? I know I've got a view on that, Mike. There's an Australian study that I saw recently, and there's a huge amount of information about learning cursive and muscle memory for language learners, that it helps them to memorize the words more easily, because rather like in sport where you might just have a muscle memory for a tennis shot or something like that, you begin to get muscle memory for words as well, so they become more automatic. But I know cursive is a new thing that you're looking to standardize across the school. I think it's really good idea, but I don't know if you want to add to that, Mike.
No, just to explain recently that there's a big drive in our school at the moment to ensure that we have a consistent approach to handwriting across our school. So over the next few years, there's going to be a transition into cursive handwriting. The teachers have been well equipped with a resource, and they will be spending 10 to 15 minutes sessions a week in class, explicitly teaching a joint handwriting. So don't worry about it. Your child will be transitioned into that, and they will receive all the necessary support in ensuring that they can successfully join their handwriting.
Okay, if I have any more questions, I'm open to any questions if people have them.
If you want to ask a question, you're going to have to unmute yourself and then pose your question. And then when you're finished with your question, you can mute yourself again.
Hello, I would like to ask a question.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Rentia and I have 2 kids in year 1 and year 2. And we are speaking Dutch at home. They also have Dutch lessons. Your point is really clear that the home language is super important. What about adding a 3rd language like Chinese?
My view would be if your children are confident in learning those 2, I think you're uniquely placed learning Dutch and English. There's probably the 2 closest related languages in terms of relation to English. The Dutch is probably the closest one. That'd be the first point. If they're doing well with that, I think it goes back to that common underlying proficiency again. That if there's a good knowledge of things and the environment and the world around them and an understanding of that, then the learning of Chinese, in addition, it should just be bolting on again those links. So if they're doing really well and they're making really good progress and we haven't got any huge concerns about that, I think you're in the best place to, I think you should be fine going ahead with Mandarin. Also, it allows you to take advantage of the environment that you're in at the moment. I would say learning Mandarin is going to be, I would recommend that. It's probably going to be one of the most important languages in the next 30 years for children. So I would take advantage of being in Taiwan and having the opportunity to be exposed to Mandarin as well in the environment when you go out shopping, in the street, on the bus, everywhere. Take advantage of that.
We also recognize as a school when a child is new to English, their first priority is number 1 to maintain the home language, then to acquire the English, to make links to the curriculum. And when we feel the child is no longer a high need EAL child, then there is scope within that then to transition that child into the Chinese language and culture classes that we have on offer at school. But that only comes when the child is no longer withdrawn from class and is only receiving the EAL in-class support. But yeah, our main priority at school, keep that home language strong. The child gets the necessary support that they need to be able to develop the English as an additional language so that they can eventually independently access the mainstream curriculum. And when we feel that child is ready, we then have that offer that they transition into the Chinese language and culture classes.
Okay, I've got just the questions come through on the chat. We'll look to wrap things up shortly. It says, will grammar be covered in a systematic way from EAL? So the answer to that is yes, we'll be looking at grammar continuum where we can develop those skills. So again, the 2 areas in the classroom, across the curriculum, there's a lot of opportunity for grammar. If you think, go back to PE, learn about instructional language, and then there's huge opportunity to develop those skills in the non-threatening environment of doing sport. But then in the pull-out sessions, it's going to allow teachers to work along a grammar continuum where they can build on the skills that are there already and start to tap in to some of the underlying grammar knowledge from first language. So while the grammar might be totally different in your first language to English, what there is an understanding of how grammar works, a general understanding of the mechanics of that. And a great activity to do with children is to take the English and say, well, how would you say that in your language? And it often causes a lot of laughter and fun in the classroom when students try and figure that grammar out back into their first language again from the English, and they get to share with each other about the grammar. So yes, in the classroom environment, when the students might not know it's always happening, but it's certainly there, but also mechanical, some teaching along to work along a grammar continuum, taught in a specific way. Yes. I've got time for a couple more, if there's anybody's got one. I think we're good then. So I'll say thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, go on, Mike.
But just before we go, a quick reminder that our next the parent workshop is on the 6th of October, and Mr. Stallwood will be presenting that, and the topic on that one is around assessment. So that's a note for your diaries.
So just add that there'll be a little blurb on that in the newsletter this Friday, so look out for that, everyone.
Peter, thank you very much for your informative presentation.
I've got one more that's just come through, Mike.
Oh,
it's
okay.
a last minute one, and it's about a recommendation for online reading.
Right.
So it's quite, this is something that I'm looking to, I've been getting some quotations for. There's a program called Raz Kids. It's there in the school already, but I'm looking to expand that out to all of the EAL students. So I'm just in the process of dealing with Reading A to Z. It's an excellent program, and it really, really works in terms of variety and choice of books, in terms of supporting resources for teachers, but also for parents. You get a weekly report of progress and areas that you need to work on. And students who use that every day, very regularly, really can make some fantastic progress very quickly. I've seen the results of it, and it's coming very soon. I think by half term, we'll look to push that one out after half term. We'll just get everything set up. But it's a really good online reading program, and we're going to provide that one for the students to use. So just to say thank you to everybody for your time this morning. I'm really looking forward to meeting you all in person in a couple of weeks. We're hoping to travel out on Thursday. Then we'll do our quarantine, my third quarantine of the summer. But it's going to be really exciting, and really looking forward to saying hello to you all in person. So we'll wrap up there, and we will we'll say have a great morning, have a great rest of the week, and take care.
Peter, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.